Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A boy, no more than 9 years old, standing alone on the frozen Mongolian steppe. His father has just been poisoned. His tribe has abandoned him, his mother, and his siblings left to die in one of the harshest environments on Earth. He's cold, he's starving, and by all accounts, he should become just another forgotten casualty of the brutal steppe politics. But this boy doesn't die. Instead, he becomes the most feared name in human history. A name that would make emperors tremble, kingdoms collapse, and an empire spanning from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe rise from nothing. This boy would become Genghis Khan, and his story isn't just about conquest, it's about one of the most remarkable transformations in human history. A transformation so complete that even today, nearly 800 years after his death, 16 million men carry his DNA in their veins. Today, we're diving deep into the rise of the man who changed everything. From abandoned orphan to the architect of the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. This is the story of Genghis Khan, a story of vengeance, genius, brutality, and an unlikely vision that would reshape human civilization forever. Let me take you back to the year 1162, to the vast grasslands of Mongolia, a place where survival wasn't just difficult, it was an art form. The Mongolian plateau was home to dozens of nomadic tribes, constantly fighting over pastures, livestock, and honor. Life was cheap, and loyalty was expensive. Into this world was born Temüjin, the boy, who would become Genghis Khan. His father, Yasuge, was a minor chieftain of the Borgian tribe, not powerful enough to dominate, but important enough to have enemies. And enemies, in that world, meant death. When Temüjin was just 9 years old, his father made a fateful decision. He arranged for his son to marry Bert, a girl from another tribe, cementing an alliance. But on the journey home, Yasuge stopped to share a meal with a group of Tatars, the same people who had been enemies of his clan for generations. It was a fatal mistake. The Tatars recognized him and poisoned his food. Yasuge died slowly, painfully, and when the news reached his tribe, everything changed. Without a strong leader, the Borgian tribe made a cold calculation. Why follow a dead man's family? They abandoned Temüjin, his mother Holon, and his siblings on the steppe, in winter, with almost nothing. Think about that for a moment. A widow and her children cast out to die. But Holon was extraordinary. She kept her family alive by digging for roots, catching fish with her bare hands, and hunting small game. She taught her children that survival required more than strength. It required cunning, unity, and absolute determination. But survival on the steppe wasn't just about finding food. It was about navigating a political landscape as treacherous as the terrain. Young Temüjin learned this lesson brutally when he killed his own half-brother Bektar in a dispute over hunting spoils. It was a shocking act, and his mother was horrified. But it also established something crucial. Temüjin would not be pushed around, not even by family. This caught the attention of the Taishiad tribe, who saw the young man as a potential threat. They captured him and put him in a wooden cholera kangan, tending to keep him as a slave. But Temüjin was already becoming the man who would conquer the world. He waited for the perfect moment during a festival when his captors were drunk and distracted, then escaped into the night, collar and all. He found refuge with a sympathetic family who helped remove the collar. And from that moment, Temüjin understood something profound. Loyalty could be earned, not just inherited. The people who helped him weren't from his tribe or his bloodline. They helped him because they saw something in him: potential, charisma, strength. Now, let's fast forward a few years. Temüjin is no longer a boy. He's become a young warrior with a growing reputation. He's married Bert, his childhood betrothed, and started gathering followers. But the steppe doesn't reward ambition, it tests it. His first major test came from the Merkits. Remember how Temüjin's father had once kidnapped Temüjin's mother from the Merkits? Well, the Merkits had long memories. In a brutal act of revenge, they raided Temüjin's camp and kidnapped Bert, intending to make her the wife of one of their warriors. For Temüjin, this wasn't just personal, it was an existential crisis. On the steppe, a man who couldn't protect his wife had no honor. And without honor, he had no followers. He needed help, and he needed it fast. He turned to Togrul, the Khan of the Karat tribe, a man who had once been his father's blood brother. He also reached out to Jomuka, his childhood friend. Together, they assembled a force and launched a devastating raid on the Merkits. They rescued Bert, but she was pregnant. The paternity of her first son, Joki, would remain forever uncertain, a shadow that would haunt Temüjin's family for generations. But this rescue mission taught Temüjin something crucial about warfare on the steppe. Speed and surprise were everything. The traditional way of fighting involved massed formations and frontal assaults. Temüjin saw the weakness in this approach. He began to develop something new, fluid, fast-moving cavalry tactics that would become his signature. His next major confrontation was with the Tatars, the people who had killed his father. But this wasn't just about revenge. The Jin dynasty in northern China, a powerful sedentary empire, wanted the Tatars dealt with. They enlisted Togrul and Temüjin to do their dirty work. In 1202, Temüjin faced the Tatars in battle. He didn't just defeat them, he annihilated them. But what he did next was shocking even by steppe standards. He ordered the execution of every Tatar male taller than the height of a wagon axle. Women and children were absorbed into his own tribes, but the adult men, the ones who might seek revenge, were systematically eliminated. It was brutal. It was ruthless. And it sent a message across the steppe. Temüjin wasn't playing by the old rules. This wasn't about temporary dominance or extracting tribute. This was about permanent change. Now, here's where Genghis Khan's true genius emerges. Not just as a warrior, but as an organizer and innovator. Because what he built wasn't just an army. It was a meritocratic killing machine, unlike anything the world had seen. Traditional Mongolian society was organized around tribes and clans. Your status was determined by your birth. If you were born into a noble family, you led. If you weren't, you followed. Temüjin looked at this system and saw its fatal flaw. It wasted talent. So he did something revolutionary. He broke up the old tribal affiliations and reorganized his growing army into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. These units, called Arbans, Zuans, Mingans, and Tumans, were based on merit and loyalty, not bloodline. A shepherd's son could rise to command thousands if he proved himself. A former enemy could become a trusted general if he swore loyalty. This was radical. This was dangerous. And this was incredibly effective. Genghis Khan instituted a set of laws called the Yasa. These laws were strict, but they were applied equally to everyone. A noble who stole was punished the same as a commoner. A general who failed in battle faced consequences. This created something unprecedented, discipline and accountability in a society that had always been fractured by tribal loyalties. But discipline alone doesn't win wars. Genghis Khan understood that warfare was evolving. The Mongols were already superb horseman boys, learned to ride before they could walk. But Genghis Khan turned this cultural advantage into a military revolution. Each Mongol warrior maintained multiple horses, usually 3 to 5. This meant they could cover vast distances without exhausting their mounts. While European knights were slow and heavily armored, Mongol cavalry could travel 70 miles in a day, strike without warning, and disappear before an enemy could respond. Their primary weapon was the composite bow made from layers of horn, wood, and sinew. It was shorter than the English longbow, but just as powerful, and crucially, it could be fired from horseback. A Mongol warrior could shoot accurately while riding at full gallop, forwards, backwards, or to either side. But Genghis Khan's most devastating weapon wasn't physical, it was psychological. He pioneered the use of terror as a strategic tool. Before attacking a city, he would send envoys with a simple message: surrender and live peacefully under Mongol rule, or resist and face total annihilation. Many didn't believe him at first. They learned. When the city of Nishapur resisted, the Mongols killed every living thing: humans, cats, dogs, even rats. They stacked the skulls in pyramids as a warning. When word spread, other cities started opening their gates without a fight. Why lose everything when you could keep your life, your property, and your freedom to worship? This wasn't mindless brutality. It was calculated. Every massacre saved Mongol lives in future campaigns because it convinced others to surrender. Genghis Khan understood that the best battle is the one you don't have to fight. By 1206, Temüjin had united the Mongolian tribes under his rule. At a great assembly called a Kurultai, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler. He was approximately 44 years old, and he had transformed from an abandoned orphan into the undisputed master of the steppe. But the steppe wasn't enough. Genghis Khan looked south, toward the wealthy civilizations that had always treated the nomads as barbarians. The Jin dynasty in northern China was the first target. The Jin were powerful. They had millions of subjects, sophisticated bureaucracy, fortified cities with massive walls, and armies equipped with the latest military technology, including gunpowder weapons and siege engines. On paper, the Mongols shouldn't have stood a chance. But Genghis Khan didn't play by conventional rules. He began his campaign in 1211, and immediately the Chinese learned that their walls meant nothing. The Mongols simply bypassed cities, destroying the countryside, cutting supply lines, and forcing the Jin army to come out and fight in open terrain, exactly where the Mongol cavalry excelled. When the Mongols needed to take fortified cities, Genghis Khan did something unprecedented for a nomadic leader. He learned siege warfare. He recruited Chinese and Muslim engineers who understood advanced siege equipment. He captured specialists in gunpowder weapons and forced them to work for him. The Mongols adapted with terrifying speed. They built catapults, siege towers, and undermined walls. They diverted rivers to flood cities. They even used prisoners as human shields, forcing them to fill moats with rubble or attack walls first, absorbing the defenders' arrows. City after city fell. Beijing itself was besieged multiple times. The Jin dynasty, which had ruled northern China for over a century, was brought to its knees. By 1215, Beijing had fallen, and the Jin were reduced to a rump state, desperately clinging to survival. But Genghis Khan's attention was already turning west. In the early 13th century, the Khwarazm Empire stretched across Central Asia, encompassing modern-day Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and parts of Afghanistan. It was rich, powerful, and cultured a center of Islamic learning and trade. Genghis Khan didn't want war with Khwarazm. He wanted trade. In 1218, he sent a large caravan of Muslim merchants carrying valuable goods as a gesture of goodwill and commercial interest. It should have been the beginning of a profitable relationship. Instead, the governor of the border city of Otrar, a man named Inal-Huk, accused the merchants of being spies. He seized their goods and executed them all. Genghis Khan gave the Khwarazmian Shah, Muhammad II, a chance to make amends. He sent ambassadors demanding that Inal-Huk be handed over for justice. The Shah's response was to execute the lead ambassador and send the others back with their beards burned off, a profound insult in Mongol culture. Big mistake, enormous mistake, possibly one of the worst diplomatic decisions in human history. Genghis Khan assembled an army of over 100,000 warriors and marched west. What followed was one of the most devastating military campaigns in history. The Mongols didn't just defeat the Khwarazmian Empire, they erased it. The campaign began in 1219. City after city fell. Bukhara, one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning, was captured and burned. Genghis Khan allegedly rode into the city's great mosque and declared, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Samarkand, one of the wealthiest cities in Central Asia, resisted for just 5 days before the defenders realized the futility and surrendered. The Mongols were merciful to those who surrendered quickly. They lived and were incorporated into the empire. But some cities chose to resist. Urgench, the capital, held out for months. When it finally fell, the Mongols destroyed it so thoroughly that they diverted the Amu Darya River through the city ruins to ensure it could never be rebuilt. The Khwarazmian Shah fled, dying miserably on an island in the Caspian Sea. His son, Jalal ad-Din, continued fighting and even won a few victories, but ultimately he too was crushed. The Mongol generals Subutai and Jib pursued remnants of the Khwarazmian forces all the way to the Caucasus and into Russia, defeating multiple armies along the way. This wasn't just conquest, it was a masterclass in logistics, strategy, and ruthless efficiency. The Mongols coordinated multiple army groups across thousands of miles, maintained supply lines through hostile territory, and adapted to fighting in cities, mountains, and deserts with equal effectiveness. But here's what makes Genghis Khan truly fascinating. He wasn't just a destroyer. He was also a builder, and his approach to governing his vast empire was as innovative as his military tactics. Genghis Khan implemented a policy that was revolutionary for his time: religious tolerance. In an era where religious wars were tearing apart Europe and the Middle East, the Mongol Empire allowed Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and shamans to practice their faiths freely, as long as they obeyed Mongol law and paid their taxes. Why? Because Genghis Khan was a pragmatist. He believed that forcing people to change their religion created unnecessary resistance. It was easier to let them keep their gods as long as they accepted him as their earthly ruler. Mongol law was harsh but fair. Theft was punishable by death. Adultery was punishable by death. But these laws applied to everyone equally, from the lowest herder to the highest noble. This created a level of security and predictability that was actually an improvement over many existing systems. Merchants loved the Mongol Empire because travel was safe. The Mongols established the Yam system, a network of way stations where travelers could rest, exchange horses, and get supplies. For the first time in centuries, a merchant could travel from China to the Mediterranean with minimal risk of being robbed. Genghis Khan also valued talent and expertise. He exempted doctors, teachers, and religious leaders from taxes. He recruited administrators from conquered peoples, Chinese bureaucrats, Persian tax collectors, Turkic advisors, creating a multicultural administration that could govern effectively across linguistic and cultural boundaries. But make no mistake, this tolerance came with a price. The price was absolute obedience. Rebel against Mongol rule, and you faced total annihilation. Accept Mongol rule, and you could prosper. It was a clear, brutal bargain, and it worked. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, possibly from injuries sustained in a fall from his horse, he had transformed the world. The Mongol Empire didn't die with him. It continued to expand under his sons and grandsons, eventually controlling the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to Vietnam. But his impact went far beyond territory. The Mongols facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultures across Eurasia. Gunpowder technology spread from China to Europe. Paper money, printing, and the compass traveled along Mongol trade routes. Even the Black Death may have spread along these same routes, a darker consequence of global connectivity. Genghis Khan's legal code influenced successor states for centuries. His emphasis on meritocracy over aristocracy planted seeds that would later grow into more modern concepts of governance. His religious tolerance, while self-serving, created spaces where different faiths coexisted peacefully, a stark contrast to the religious violence consuming other parts of the world. But we can't romanticize him. Genghis Khan and his armies were responsible for the deaths of millions. Some estimates suggest that 10% of the world's population died during the Mongol conquests. Entire cities were erased. Civilizations were destroyed. Irrigation systems that had sustained agriculture for millennia were demolished, turning fertile land into desert. The Middle East, in particular, never fully recovered. Before the Mongols, Baghdad was arguably the intellectual and economic center of the world. After the Mongol sack of 1258, conducted by Genghis Khan's grandson, it became a provincial backwater. The region's decline can be traced in part to the devastation wrought by Mongol invasions. So who was Genghis Khan really? Monster or genius? Barbarian or visionary? The answer is, he was all of these things. He was a product of the brutal world that created him, but he was also a transformer of that world. He rose from nothing, literally abandoned to die, and through sheer will, intelligence, and ruthlessness, he built the most extensive empire humanity had ever seen. His military innovations influenced warfare for centuries. His administrative systems anticipated modern governance. His empire facilitated global trade and cultural exchange on a scale that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. But he achieved all of this through unspeakable violence. For every city that surrendered and prospered, there was another that resisted and was obliterated. For every life saved by Mongol trade security, there were countless others destroyed by Mongol conquest. Genghis Khan forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Can great achievements justify terrible means? Can we separate the historical impact of a figure from their moral character? Should we? What we can say with certainty is this: the boy abandoned on the frozen steppe changed the course of human history. The world before Genghis Khan and the world after him were fundamentally different places. He connected East and West in ways that had never been done before. He proved that organization and innovation could overcome numerical and technological advantages. He showed that social mobility and meritocracy could create more effective systems than rigid hierarchies. And perhaps most importantly, he demonstrated that a single individual, through extraordinary vision and terrible will, can literally reshape the map of the world. Nearly 800 years after his death, we're still living in the world that Genghis Khan helped create. The trade routes, the cultural exchanges, the political boundaries, even the genetic legacy, 16 million descendants, all trace back to that abandoned boy on the Mongolian steppe. That's the story of Genghis Khan, from orphan to emperor, from victim to conqueror, from Temüjin to the universal ruler, the man who changed everything. The next time you look at a world map, remember, it wasn't drawn by diplomats or natural borders alone. It was drawn by people with ambition, genius, and often terrible power. And perhaps no one wielded that power more effectively or more devastatingly than the man once known as Temüjin, the boy left to die, who became Genghis Khan, the man who redrew the world.